all stand. Have Greg lead us in the invocation. Okay. You said there was no guest. Okay. All right. Well, thank y'all, everybody, for coming. Do you see a new face, Miss Ortiz? Welcome. We'll get right here we'll go to item number 4, campus reports and recognitions. You have anything for that?
Who's first? We don't have a whole lot.
We don't have recognitions.
No recognitions?
Because,
Right.
you know, and I know we all reported our summer school.
Campus reports.
I do not. Do y'all? Anybody? We good? Okay. All right, well, we'll go to item number 5. There's nobody signed up for that, so we'll skip item 5 and move to item 6. P-TECH school model and application process presentation by Dr. Alexander. Welcome.
Introduce you. Just wanted to introduce Dr. Kim Alexander. Kim was a long-time superintendent for Roscoe, Roscoe ISD, and now has transitioned into a nonprofit that helps schools put up a Principles in Technology Early College High School, among other things. And so Dr. Alexander is the most knowledgeable person on this subject that I know of in the state of Texas, and that makes him the most knowledgeable person in the nation. So we are, and I'm serious when I say that. So we are very privileged to have him here tonight. And please, as he presents, and he's going to be flying low. He's got a lot to say and could keep us here all night, but he's vowed not to. So anyway, please ask him any questions throughout or at the end that you would choose to. Dr. Alexander?
Yeah, I appreciate the exaggerated introduction, but that was kind of you, Mr. Hopper. But appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. And I deal with a lot of dilemma, and I'm always in a dilemma. And of course, the dilemma tonight is I've dealt with a lot of boards over the years, and I know most boards, they don't sleep till noon and then mess around and come to the board meeting. Most of you have been working all day. You're tired, and this is one more thing on your deal. And so I am going to try to expedite this and cram about an hour and a half's worth into less than an hour and be out of your hair, because I know you've got other business to take care of. But just to tell you a little bit of background on us, I'm from Roscoe, Texas. I grew up there. My family's been farming and ranching there since 1917. So we kind of know the lay of the land. With us tonight, my wife, Marcia. She'll begin the 47th year of a life sentence next week. And she was the longtime Dean of Academic Affairs in Roscoe for 40 years. And now she's with our nonprofit. And Dr. Rachel McLean is our Chief of Staff. And she really is one of the most knowledgeable in P-TECH and CTE anywhere in the country. And so I can take a little credit for what she knows. But necessity is the mother of invention. And I coached and taught in Roscoe during the something because I knew these kids, and I'd seen Roscoe change over the years, not necessarily for the better. A much more economically disadvantaged population than a generation or two ago. And when I was watching kids as they crossed that graduation stage, and our disadvantaged students were great students. They'd have good grades and good test scores. But as they walked off that graduation stage, for many of those students, the best part of their life was now behind them. It was like walking off a cliff. And so that's when we really got to looking at, what can we do about this? Because we're celebrating this graduation and this success, but then as we're looking at our students, they're not being successful. And so that led to a research project there in Roscoe, the effects of instruction and creative problem solving on cognition, creativity, and satisfaction. It was designed by Texas A&M and Texas Tech University, which led to becoming later, after our board did a year-long study in 2007, looking at the problem, working closely with our regional service center, and that led to Roscoe becoming the first school-wide early college, rural school-wide early college in Texas in 2009. In 2012, there were early colleges and STEM academies, and somebody finally realized, college readiness is workforce readiness. And so they started merging those two concepts. And in 2017, that became what's known as PTech, Pathways in Technology, Early College High School. And then in 2019, as a result of a lot of the grants that we had, we were hosting a lot of schools. A couple of years there, we probably hosted 50 or 60 schools in a year. And that's when Commissioner Morath at TEA approached us about becoming a nonprofit to actively help schools that were interested in elevating post-secondary credential attainment for their students. And so that's when Collegiate Edunation really evolved, and so we'll be talking a little bit about what that is and the services that we provide for schools that are interested in that. And next slide. And we quickly realized that as an independent school district, independent school districts were designed to produce students with a high school diploma. And independently, that's about the resources that we have. But we've had the good fortune of developing a lot of collaborations over the years, and that has led to multiple opportunities for our students as we were able to align K-12 with higher education and workforce to provide a support system through completion of a more meaningful outcome for all students. And I was up in Washington, D.C. in 2011 with an early college grant, and the little guy with a bow tie from Harvard was looking right at me. And he said, do you realize that you're as successful of a superintendent as your least successful student? And right away I could think of our least successful student, and he wasn't very successful. And so what does that make me? So it was a very humbling plane ride home, but that really challenged us to start looking at, is this the best we can do for student outcomes? And if not, what is the best we can do? And we have a moral imperative as professional educators to produce the highest student outcome that we can conjure up. And so that's kind of what led to that, and that eventually led to several of the edu businesses that we will show you in a minute, and to create paid student apprenticeship opportunities, to create work-based learning experiences. I have a hard time imagining this because I grew up on the farm, and I distinctly remember out there chopping cotton when I was 5 years old. So we didn't have any problem with finding work, but most students today are graduating from not only high school but college, and they've never had a job. And so how do we redesign school to address that issue? Next slide. And we thought it was just a Roscoe problem initially. This is really recent data from Commit Partnership here in Dallas. They're part of the Dallas Promise, an urban inner-city initiative. But in Texas, the most recent cohort of graduates to turn 24 or 6 years after graduation from high school, that have earned any kind of post-secondary credential is 23%. In rural sectors, that number is 13% pre-COVID and single-digit post-COVID. The estimated loss in lifetime earnings for that one cohort is $111 billion per cohort. And so that really opened I knew that ignorance was expensive, but now when you put it in that dollar, you know, they say, well, the cost of education is expensive, but the cost of an uneducated population is devastating for Texas. Texas is the fastest growing state in the nation, gaining 1,000 new residents a day, and 900 are economically disadvantaged. So if we don't redesign our system to support students through a more meaningful outcome, 99% of the 11.8 million jobs created in the United States since 2008 require a post-secondary credential. Next slide. And so that, since 2019, we've been pretty busy, and this fall of 21-22 we'll actually be serving 7 campuses in Texas and 1 in Boone County, West Virginia. It's a national model. 17 campuses and about 4,500 students. In between Texas and West Virginia, about 8,000 students. As we're really trying to help schools. We've been working on this in Roscoe for over 15 years, and our mission is to help schools that want to do that to expedite that process and not spend 15 years doing it. Our greatest asset is our human capital, and the biggest tragedy is wasted human capital. Next slide. So what we're trying to do is take from lessons learned, and I tell people all the time, I'm a lot more of an expert on what not to do again than what to do. So I can hopefully help folks avoid getting off in the ditch, but we're trying to set up 12 regional models. We've had a really good partnership with AgriLife Extension since 2012, and so we've got a research component of our model. It's a community-based accountability system, but we would like to establish 12 regional models to become true models by 2023 for schools in those regions. And the goal being to try to elevate student outcomes in 300 of the 700 small and rural districts in Texas by 2030 as part of a 60 by 30 Texas initiative, and then in 600 of the 700 small and rural districts by 2036 as part of Texas 2036, another rural, or not just a rural initiative, but Texas initiative. Next slide. And so that's kind of a plan. I'm not the brainchild behind that. Like I say, I'm just a farmer, and but we've got some pretty smart folks at that Borlaug Foundation at Texas A&M that know a lot about scaling. They have a lot of experience in scaling agricultural practices in third world countries to avoid starvation, but they're heavily engaged in the development of this rural model over the last 15 years. Next slide. And so I wasn't going to show this. This is a dated video created by Raise Your Hand in Texas in 2016. But in a sense, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and it can help explain how we're trying to redesign school where students learn by doing. See if that'll play. And if not, no big deal. We don't have time to show it anyway. Okay, next slide. It's on Roscoe's website, so you can access it there. But just a way to take a system down to 3-year-olds, and the reason Dr. Briers would say we start at 3 years old because we can't get them at 3 months. And the sooner we can get them and start, for disadvantaged students especially, to start closing that gap. I was at a P16 conference one time several years ago, and it's estimated that disadvantaged students have heard up to 400 million fewer words by age 4. And so that kind of helped me understand what the dilemma is. So, and then elevating that support system. Students do fine regardless of their background with a strong support system. The traditional support beyond grade 12 has been parents with money. with those kind of demographic numbers in Texas, fewer and fewer students enjoy that. And so how do we level that playing field for all students where we can truly say, we don't care where you come from, we're interested in where you want to go. And just because you were born into generational poverty, we're not going to give you an excuse to die in generational poverty. We're going to create hope for all students. Next slide. And so, talked about partnerships. We have multiple higher ed partnerships, and one of the most recent ones, we use the P-TECH designation, and I told Commissioner Morath, since our students have the associate degree before they graduate high school, we're going to use the P-TECH designation where we can keep them in our system. We can draw CTE funding on them additional 2 years to support them through the bachelor's degree. And so we've got P-TECH students. We had our first cohort in 2019, and West Texas A&M designed a degree that can be delivered to students in Roscoe at our Adult Education Center. And they designed it where the students can earn up to 84 hours through the community college to get the cost of the degree down. And so our first cohort of 7 at West Texas A&M, 2 of those graduated early. 5 of them graduated on time in May. Average age 20, student debt 0, and a higher average GPA than the average WT graduate. So there's that importance of a support system. We've got a Texas Tech Grow Your Own program. Our valedictorian at Roscoe in 2020 will be graduating next month from Texas Tech University with his bachelor's degree in teacher certification. And then we've got a similar deal down in Angelo State where the students are actually in San Angelo, but they helped us find the paid student apprenticeship for the P-TECH. So we think we've stumbled onto an innovation that works. These are all extremely disadvantaged students that would not be successful without this level of support. And so I'm convinced that the only way we're going to achieve the 60 by 30 Texas is with the support system. We can encourage them, we can advise them, it helps a little, but it doesn't get them across the finish line because they have more barriers. The more disadvantaged, the more barriers, the earlier you hit barriers, and the more apt you are to stop because of those barriers. The real culprit in generational poverty is low expectations. Next slide. And so we won't play that movie, but that's Amanda Sanchez. She graduated, she was P-TECH cohort of 2019, extremely disadvantaged. She graduated last August with 9 months of P-TECH support, and so she's been in graduate school for 9 months now, still getting P-TECH support to finish graduate school. Next slide. And so one of the things, the AASA Successful Practices Network, that work is about to become the AASA Learning 2025. And so we're trying to work a deal where these 12 models will be national demonstration sites for innovation, and the innovation that we're promoting is post-secondary credential attainment for all students. Next slide. That may be on there twice, but anyway. Okay, yeah, going the wrong way. Yeah. There we go. And of course, as I mentioned, we're doing a better job with the K-12 model than ever before. Graduation rates are higher than ever before. But, folks my age, you could take a high school diploma and a good work ethic, and there was literally opportunity everywhere. That is what has drastically changed, and according to Bill Daggett with International Center for Leadership and Education, that dynamic is going to change exponentially moving forward. If you think the world has changed in the last 20 years, it will change more in the next 5. Next slide. And so we're part of the TASA School Transformation Network that developed the visioning document back in 2006 that, really asked the question, to whom should schools be accountable and for what? to a state for multiple choice test scores or to students and their parents for meaningful life successful outcomes. So it's really learning to develop a culture. Peter Drucker would say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so really, how do we change that culture from low expectations for some folks to high expectations for all students? Next slide. And so it takes collaboration. And, you know, back in 2009, when we became a school-wide early college, there wasn't a lot of collaboration. There wasn't a lot of collaborative spirit with community college. There sure wasn't with the 4 years. There wasn't with workforce. So we've come a 1,000 miles in the last 11 years, and it's becoming a much more collaborative society as everyone in Texas is now realizing we've got a problem and we're going to have to work together to develop the solution. Next slide. And so Real Estate Center at Texas A&M makes a lot of demographic projections. They're estimating 55 million Texans by 2055. And if we fail to elevate the educational trajectory, 40 million will be in poverty. And we all know that if that's the dynamic in Texas, nobody wins. And so what do we do about it? The rural dilemma is real. Typically, fewer resources lead to even lower expectations and lower outcomes. The advantage to being rural, you know, Dr. Shin says this all the time. You know, we talk about the rural dilemma, but one advantage is the smaller the ship, the easier it is to turn. And so it's easier to build models for school transformation in rural settings. The more rural you are, typically, the less bureaucracy. You know, you're out there, people don't even care what you do. Just stay out of the way. So anyway, next slide. And so I mentioned 60 by 30 Texas, and 60%, you know, on any kind of metric is not a passing grade. So we're shooting to have 60% of our folks be successful by 2030. But the reality is, I think one thing we've learned in our time working at this at the last 15 years, if we don't elevate this support system, the 60 is a pipe dream for Texas. Next slide. Rigor without relevance is not sustainable, and so we're demanding a lot out of these students, and we've got to be able to show them. We can't say, do this because I said so. We have to help them understand, here's why you need to do this to be successful. So we've got to provide that relevance. There's a major culprit, and I'm sure y'all have had those conversations. We have all over. You know, we've got a very punitive A through F accountability system in Texas that requires, it encourages folks to teach to a multiple choice test. But like Scott McCowan would say, there's just not very many jobs where you go and sit there and take a multiple choice test all day. So it's a real design issue with the current accountability system. We're part of TPAC. It's 43 schools in Texas that are building models for community-based accountability systems for more meaningful outcomes, hoping to one day become exempt from the current accountability system because we've created a more meaningful system for student outcomes. Next slide. Bill Daggett talks about the quadrants. Quadrant D is high levels of rigor and relevance, the rigor, the college readiness, the relevance, the workforce relevance. And what he maintains is the only jobs that can't be automated are the quadrant D jobs. He says if you can write an algorithm for a task, that job is gone. And so I'll show you next slide and see if that will play. You may have seen this one anyway, the future of work. It'd probably be a blessing if it won't play. We'll just get through it a little quicker, but you can access, there it is. We'll watch this one right quick. Has anyone already seen this one? Thank you. That's all right. You can Google that one and watch it though. But the message on there, it shows all these things, how the world is changing. And I always ask at the end of the video, what did you notice was missing? And it's the people. You got tractors out there with no people on them. You got trucks driving down the road. You've got McDonald's with no people. And all those things that we see happening around us, you know, and it's really happening, and it's really going to impact the world that these students live in. Talked about barriers, and there's just a chart of some of the barriers that disadvantaged students experience. And, you know, we tell them go do it, but we've learned that they can do it if we'll support them through it and not just encourage them to do it. And so you can see a lot of things that we just take for granted that students know or have access to, and lots of barriers on the chart. Next slide.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes, sir.
Would you mind taking just a second and explain P16 to this group?
Sure. P16, you know, K-12, kindergarten through 12, and then there was an initiative to bump education down below kindergarten into pre-K, because 5 for some students is too late, 4 is too late, 3 maybe, and then 16 just upping the support system through grade 16. And what we've developed, the reason it became P20, is we've learned this through a lot of trial and error. The greater the expectation that we can structure for a student, the greater the student aspires to accomplish, and the more a student aspires to accomplish, the more they accomplish. And we know this about people. We can do anything that we believe that we can do. And so our mission is to help students believe that they can achieve, if they can think of it, they can be that, if that's what they want to be, and help them really believe that. And so it's a culture shift, and to try to create a culture of high expectations for all students, and not just tracking some students into a lower expectation because we don't know how to structure a successful model for them. So it's really a cultural shift that doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a course of years, but you have to start somewhere.
Yes, sir. So the difference is a child growing up in what we would call an economically disadvantaged home, or whatever, however you want to phrase it, does not have those built-in supports.
That's right.
Oftentimes. And so what you're talking about doing with a P16 and specifically a P20 is to provide those supports that they otherwise would not have, and that oftentimes is the difference. That kid may start, but man, they just couldn't finish.
That's exactly right.
What do those tangible supports look like? Just, I don't mean to, anyway, if you could explain.
Well, it really starts, like I said, in early childhood, and you know, Montessori is not a part of our model because we're piloting that. But that would be an example of a non-traditional support that's designed to focus on disadvantaged students taking ownership of their learning at an earlier age, and with a laser focus on numeracy and literacy, which is the albatross in the room for most folks. AVID college readiness. And when we became an early college, I had never even heard of AVID. It stands for Advancement Via Individual Determination, and it's just a college readiness support system, and all the students in grades 7 through 12 go through AVID every single day. And looking back on it, what I know now is that's the difference in 90% completion rates and under 50%. So it's a structural issue. And then school-wide early college would be a, you know, we were a strong dual credit school since the early 90s. But as we got to looking at our population, the very students that could most benefit from the opportunity that were the least apt to take advantage of it. And so it's really designing it where students that would not have that support any other way, they now have that support system. And then I talked about the P-TECH supporting them through the bachelor's degree. And then they're all in a 20-hour student apprenticeship to bring the work-based learning to the thing, where they have industry-based certification to go along with that degree. And then the third component, in addition to the college degrees and the workforce certifications, the student research through school-wide research, that's quadrant D. That's as high cognition as you can get, where students have a problem and they work to conduct an investigation and collect the data and solutions. They organize it, they present it, they defend it, and they start doing that in the third grade. And I didn't think third graders could do that, but it's a strong argument for multiple measures of student accountability. Some of the best researchers are some of the least proficient standardized test takers. And so just our system redesign is really what we're talking about. And, you know, I do a lot of presentations, and they say you should always quote an education philosopher when you're doing an education presentation. And being rural, I like to quote Jeff Foxworthy. And Jeff would say the definition of stupid is to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So how do we look at it different and really look at it, use that district of innovation, and we probably use that we may have used it a little bit where that philosophy, it's easier to beg forgiveness than ask permission. And so if we thought it's something that would be a better outcome for students, we'll just try it and hope it's okay. I told Commissioner Marath, you know, when we decided to do the P-TECH thing through the bachelor's degree, it was designed to support students through the associate degree. And he said, well, I'm not sure that's legal, but I hope it is. Well, we started doing it in 2019. I'm here tonight, so I'm still out. I don't know if it's bail or what, but just looking at it differently and asking that question that TPAC asked, to whom should schools be accountable? To the state for standardized test scores, or to the parents and the students and the community? Ours is a model, not just an educational model, but to create a more highly educated rural population that will lead to the innovation that leads to rural job creation and rural economic and community development.
So if I can understand it right, and I know that there's a lot to this, but students has the potential to gain his associate's degree about the same time he graduates high school. But if he wants to go ahead and pursue a bachelor's, he or she, then the school still provides supports throughout that bachelor's degree.
That's exactly right. And we encourage as many of our students to go that traditional route. It's a great experience. But if you just can't afford that, then we don't want you to be penalized because you were born into a situation that you don't have any control over. So yeah, it's support through a meaningful outcome that we know that student's going to be successful. We know those 7 P-TECH students that have their bachelor's degree now by age 20 with no student debt and a high GPA. We know they're going to be successful because 3 or 4 of those are heading into graduate school. So there's that expectation that increases as they accomplish more at an earlier age.
You know, I think when you bundle that together, bachelor's degree, age 20, no student debt, and a higher GPA.
Yep.
That's a pretty nice bundle.
It tells us that students can be successful regardless of their background if we get our act together. Student outcomes are not going to change until what? Adult behaviors change. So till we look at this situation differently, and the student drives every decision that we make.
Dr. Dunn, in the real world, what does that support look like? Financial,
Sure. We've got a dean of continuing education, and her role is to work with those college students just like you would work with high school students, weekly grade checks, helping them get enrolled, helping them get all their paperwork, helping them making sure they get their homework assignments turned in time. All those little things that we just take for granted that students know how to do, but I don't know how many students in my career that I've seen that could have been successful, should have been successful, but they're back in Roscoe after one semester. And it's all those other things. It's not have anything to do with IQ or anything like that. It's getting all that stuff that we just assume people know how to do. And that's what AVID and support programs like that are designed to address, those types of soft skills that we've been assuming that students have that they've proven to us that they don't really have.
How did you as Roscoe Collegiate ISD now, fund this?
Roscoe was poor before it became stylish. And I use that analogy a lot. And Roscoe got a wind farm, but despite being the windmill capital of the world, Roscoe was Chapter 41 for 1 year. So the windmills took us from dirt stinking poor to dirt poor, and then now they've depreciated out and they're back dirt stinking poor. But desperate people have desperate ways. We've worked a lot to get out and chase grants that now, and Dr. McLean's going to be talking about that in a minute, that TEA has come up now with they passed House Bill 3 in 2019 to incentivize school districts to support students in CCMR and post-secondary credential attainment. So as we've got a lot of support systems that we didn't have when we were out chasing all these grants. We're a rural technical assistance provider for TEA, and they've got P-TECH grants now, and Dr. McLean talked about that. They've got School Action Fund grants. They've got Grow Your Own Teacher grants. And so they finally realized that, rural matters and rural is worth saving. Every initiative starts in urban because of impact and trickles down to rural. Well, rural is finally front and center, and legislation was just, it wasn't just specific to rural, but a lot of these grants now that we're monitoring, they're specific to rural schools.
Might say also on that support for that, the P20, what she does, she also helps them with their apprenticeships, with career planning, getting them on the right degree for those fast-growing occupations as well.
Next slide. Great questions. So that's the problem and a little bit about the solution. And so you can see the three strands there. We want associate degrees, we want bachelor's degrees, we want graduate degrees. We want higher education and with a focus on high-wage jobs. We want low student debt. There are 45 million Americans that have $1.7 trillion in student debt. And the majority of those folks did not complete the degree they were pursuing. So that's a crisis, and the big crisis in student debt, the real cost is the cost of living. Robert Duncan, who used to be Senator Duncan, and he was chancellor at Texas Tech, he told me a few years ago when he was still at Tech that the average a Tech student can earn the exact same Texas Tech degree from the McLennan campus in Waco for half price of what it cost in Lubbock. And so the cost there, and finding a way to reduce the cost, and when they live at home and we've got an adult education center they've got access to it 24/7, and to fit busy schedules. A lot of those kids are working, and they've all got an apprenticeship, and some of them have other jobs, and so just trying to make higher ed and workforce credentialing more accessible for all students. Next slide. And so that's just, some people refer to this as the rural promise. We actually work closely with Dallas ISD. Dr. Hinojosa is a good friend of mine. And really what we're thinking is, you know, in many ways, rural is the new inner city in terms of challenge. And if you can develop solutions for the two extreme ends of the problem, then things back toward the middle in suburbia are even easier. Next slide. And so there's just some of the things that come with this model. We want students working in high cognition, 95% of available class time. We conduct the Harvard instructional rounds. We brought those to Texas in 2010 to assess the level of student engagement and high cognition. STEM strategies. Texas can't fill half the STEM jobs because of uneducated workforce. Age-appropriate student research. All of our students in the network have access to the Texas A&M library. And Dr. Herbert there, he screens the research resources to make sure they're age and topic appropriate. Extension helps design the projects to make sure they're addressing real-world agricultural problems that are specific to a community. No two communities or regions of Texas are exactly alike, and West Virginia is sure not like. I thought Roscoe was rural till I went to Van, West Virginia, and up in the hollers. And so, next slide. And so, just Educate Texas has collected a lot of data over the years, and they have evidence now that students that earn the associate degree prior to graduating high school are up to 10 times more likely to complete four-year degrees. So the importance of a strong early foundation in terms of degree attainment is critical. Next slide. There's a strong correlation in degree attainment and earning power. Next slide. As well as degree attainment and employability. Next slide. The STEM thing, as I mentioned a while ago, Texas can't fill half the STEM jobs because of uneducated workforce, and so that's what we're trying to address. Not college for the purpose of college, but that lead to jobs. This is a statistic that really opened my eyes when I first saw that. Why STEM academies? Why such a focus on STEM? That's where the jobs are, and especially in Texas. And that's not going to change anytime soon. Next slide. Ours is an agricultural model, just because most of the schools that we work with in rural sectors, that's still a driver of the economy. It may not be the driver, and a lot of people don't realize that there are 60,000 annual jobs in agriculture that require a bachelor's degree or higher, currently only able to fill about 35,000 of those. And why biotechnology? It's going to take that type of innovation, and we'll talk, the movie that had there, it had our embryology lab, and we build cattle embryos where customers can just design their cow or their bull to the specifications, and you build it. And that's the kind of biotechnology that it's going to take to feed and clothe. I need to update the slide because it's actually 10 billion projected people on the planet by 2050 now. Next slide. And so alignment with pathways. There's room for all major universities in this model. It's kind of a because of our affiliation with A&M, it's kind of a land-grant model to link rural K-12 to higher ed through the land-grant infrastructure that's in every state, and the extension arm that's a higher ed arm that reaches out into rural sectors, so it's kind of a natural. We're working very closely with West Virginia University up there with Boone County. And so that's just some of the component. That's by far the most complex part of the model. The challenge in rural sectors is your proximity to meaningful apprenticeship opportunities. But that situation is a whole lot easier and more doable in someone in your locale than, say, someone out there in Irene, out in far west Texas, or or even Throckmorton up there, you know, a very rural county. So lots of apprenticeship opportunities just everywhere you look. And that's what we try to do, is work with schools and help identify what are those opportunities that make the most sense for your local community. Early college looks a lot more similar everywhere. There are no two STEM academies that'll look exactly alike. Next slide. And so that's just some of the things. I'll mention TechSmart, a new opportunity. Cumbie is one of our schools out here east of Dallas, and they developed a partnership with TechSmart out of Seattle, where they're going to come in there. They're in Seattle, they're on the East Coast in North Carolina, and now they're in the DFW area, where they come in and students that have interest and aptitude in computer programming and coding, they will come into the school and help them earn the certification and then hire them where they can live in Cumbie and work for TechSmart wherever. And so we're trying to bring those type of network opportunities to network schools. Next slide. Mentioned the school-wide 4-H and the extension. That's just been a great partnership. It complements FFA so much. Most of these schools that we work with have very strong FFA programs, and some people have the misconception that those are competitors. But we've competed very well at the national level in FFA. We had a few years ago, we had the national champion in animal systems. That project originated as a 4-H project, and so those two work very hand in hand. That's quadrant D. That's as high cognition of an activity as you can design for students. Next slide. There's just an example of like a 5th grade research poster, and then when they're in secondary school, then they write the paper to go with it, and that becomes a capstone research project their junior and senior year. And so multiple measures of accountability, and another thing we work, and Dr. McLean can talk specifically about this if you want to know more about developing local accountability systems to take some of the pressure off of standardized testing and to give you credit for other things that you're doing in regard to this, and you can actually elevate a district by a letter grade just by developing local accountability systems, and she has a lot of information on that. Next slide. We won't go through that tour, but if you get a chance to click on that, you can either go to the EduNation website at edunation.org or even the Roscoe site, and it'll give you a tour of all these Edu businesses that we have located there. Next slide. Talked about the partnerships there. Next slide. Dr. Jose Rangel on the left, he's our first 20 completer. He's first generation college goer. His mother's one of our custodians at Roscoe, and his dad's a farm worker there. And he completed his doctor's degree in physical therapy from Angelo State in 2019, and he works at the local hospital there, Rolling Plains there in Sweetwater. We won't watch that either, but that's Bill Daggett talking about that. Degree, symbolic of college readiness. Workforce certification, symbolic of workforce readiness. Student research, symbolic of lifetime learning to prepare students for careers that don't yet exist. Next slide. And so we've already looked at those, that some of the components of the model that we help schools implement. Next slide. And that's some of the strategies in the Common Instructional Framework, and those are just best practices. Most of the schools that we're working with and that we're talking with are already high flyers. They have strong teams of 8, strong superintendent, and they're already doing a lot of innovative things. They just want to do more faster and avoid some of the pitfalls, and then now take advantage of some of the partnerships that we've been able to form with TEA to secure grant funding to get that done. But the end goal is to set schools in position to access all the House Bill 3 funding. How much did you say that Venus?
658.
658,000 that you're not currently accessing, that if you adopt, that's your sustainability funding once you get the implementation grants. Next slide. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McLean to finish up, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. But I realize your attention span's already longer than mine. So, but
Thank you, Dr. Alexander.
This is just a visual image of that P20 model where you asked earlier, Mr. Hopper, about the P16 model. So the CEN does go through 20 years of school. So you can see where each of the elements start on the timeline at the bottom. We do have an Neve information system that we track students and their performance within the network districts throughout their careers with the districts. We start with experiential learning down at the pre-K, throw in blended learning by the 3rd and 4th grade, through middle school. Starting in middle school, we're wanting those students to be TSI, at least to start taking the TSI. It's a exam to get them into community colleges. So we start at the 8th grade level so that by the time they hit their 9th grade level, they are able to start with their dual credit classes. So sometimes higher ed institutions push back on that and say, no, you can't do that till your junior year, but we know you can. And so they start off more with elective classes. They hit a pretty good bulk of dual credit classes their junior and senior years, but they're aligned to all of their high school graduation requirements. And so you hear a lot of times people say, well, I want my child to do sports and drama and all the other things that are very important in a high school experience. Because it is dual credit, they can still do those things. They might have some summer classes that they still have to hit to finish their degree program, but it is possible and students can graduate with their associates. The P-TECH model starts in 9th grade. That's a Texas thing. In the CEN model, we actually want students to start on their programs of study, so their coherent sequence of CTE classes starting in 8th grade. It gives us more flexibility to be able to do those college courses by their high school career. And then students graduate with their associates, and because it is encouragement to earn those bachelor's degrees, they can remain in the system. So they're graduates, but they still remain in the system, a lot like life skill students do. They graduate, but then they will continue in the education system for several more years. And so districts can hang on to those students and then complete their bachelor's degree, still earn funding for the students, and then the P-TECH funding is weighted funding that comes through also. So that's just a snapshot of that journey, and you can see the different levels of college and career and community focus.
Dr. McLean,
Yes, sir.
if you don't mind. So what you can see up here down in that bottom level, we're heavily involved at this point in blended learning.
Mhm.
We've got our AVID program that we've reconstituted a couple of years ago. Dual credit's been strong and actually quite vigorous now for some time. As we move our way up, one of the things you're going to see is the P-TECH. Of course, that's what we're here talking about tonight. CTE. Would you just touch on the PBL up at the top and just the importance? Why is that so important?
Yeah, so that's that high cognition instructional arena where the kids are operating in. But it's project-based learning and problem-based learning. So, at the lower levels, it's more of a problem-based. Students are presented with that information. They research it. They propose a solution to that. But as they advance through the CEN model, that becomes a project-based instruction. So I'm not talking about, like your traditional posters where you have to, as a parent, your kid tells you like the night before, oh, I got to put it in the project due tomorrow. That's not what I'm talking about. So project-based learning is, it's very student-driven. There may be multiple options on answers. So there's the problem, you research it, you propose a solution, and then in project-based learning, students actually implement that solution. So it's an authentic learning environment, very hands-on, highly engaging for students, and it produces those skills of creativity, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and those are what employers say, that's what we need. We'll train kids to do whatever. We need those soft skills, those 4 C's, to be successful. So that's what that PBL means.
And as you well know, all of y'all, these students today, they're much more motivated by making a difference than they are by pleasing a teacher or for a grade. But if they think their project might be a real solution to a real Venus problem, that is the most engaging experience that you can design for students.
So we'll go to the next slide. Actually, can probably skip several. This is the typical implementation. So in the there's a little bit of a twist to this now with T-Class that has been released by TEA. Normally, in a CEN implementation, you spend a year in planning and then 2 years of implementation of the model. So that's what you see in this chart, where in year one, CEN staff is in your district, working with your district, supporting the different initiatives in the model. And then in year 2 and year 3, those become more intentional. And instead of preparing, you're launching, or instead of launching, you're expanding. And so you can see the icons with the key down, the legend down at the bottom. But we'll go on to talk through the other slides. These are the performance measures. Dr. Alexander referenced the local accountability. While we're waiting on the community-based accountability options to come into fruition, TEA has released a local accountability process. You can offset your state accountability by up to 50%. So if your campus has a C rating in the A through F system and your local system has a A rating, your campus would show a B rating. And that's what the rating is. It's an official rating. It's not like, oh, in state accountability they got this and local they got that. And so we're building out as a network a local accountability system that's important, that recognizes the work that the districts are doing. And then local districts could have other indicators. If you have a bilingual program that you're very passionate about, that's not something that all rural schools have. That might be a local indicator that you would want to add in. We'll go to the next one. This is a listing of all of the supports that comes with the CEN model. And so they're directly aligned to the elements of the model. Basically, a lot of initiatives are out there to encourage post-secondary success for students. What CEN brings is the boots on the ground to help you implement that. And so the people to come alongside of you with the experience of Roscoe and what didn't work, so that you do not have to do the trial and error process. You can go on to the next one. Oh yeah, I bet you are. This is a funding, and so what throws people off when we talk about that $515 per student, that's not a fee that the districts are paying. That's an average cost of what the model looks like in implementation. What CEN is doing, we've launched a $7.3 million philanthropic campaign, and we're looking at a lead funder coming in the next few weeks, and then that campaign will last for the next 3 years. And so that money doesn't flow to CEN, it flows through CEN to the districts to support this rural initiative. And then the public funding is coming through TEA, and so we're going to talk through some of those options with TEA about how how do you afford this. It's a heavy lift for staff and leadership, but it's also got some price tags with it, because things just don't pop out for free. So we'll talk through that. First of all, School Action Fund. Each year TEA releases a cycle of school action, and this current cycle they've just released a model for the P20 system redesign. So districts who are interested in redesigning their entire feeder pattern can qualify for this. It's $250,000 per campus for a planning year, and then $500,000 for 2 years of implementation. And for rural campuses, CEN is the technical assistance provider, and you use those grant funds to implement pieces of the model. You already have AVID in place, but if you're not using MAP, that's a piece of the model, NWEA MAP. So you use those grant funds to offset some of the model implementation. So that's school action. That's one option. You can skip through these. We'll take some. You can go back and read all of that lovely information. You have ESSER funds. You probably by this time have already had your public hearings and you have your plan in place. So this one may not be as relevant, but the CEN model does align directly with the initiatives of the ESSER funds and what districts are supposed to be doing with that. It is a great time for all districts to not do things like we've always done. There's a ton of money on the table. And if districts were not happy with what their outcomes were, then, it's a great time to be able to do that. But again, we'll skip through these. And we'll get to T-Class, which was released today. CEA's been doing a series of webinars over the past couple of weeks regarding the T-Class funding. And so what TEA has done is rolled a bunch of their initiatives into 10 decision points. We are primarily interested from a CEN standpoint in rural districts looking for CEN redesign in decisions 9 and 10. So but it's a chunk of money. Unless the link has started working in the last 2 hours that we've been here, it was supposed to be open today and the link was not working yet. And so hopefully they said check back in the morning. But you can see over on the far right side, innovative school models, that's decision 9, decision 10. And so for districts that are interested in launching into this work, what we're establishing a timeline with TEA is they would sign up if you've never received P-TECH funding, and you have not, correct? Then you can sign up for decision 9A, and it's basically saying we're going to commit to planning out a P-TECH model for the next 2 years, which is actually a longer runway than a normal P-TECH planning year. CEN would work with you, so provide that support for planning. We would look at your workforce data. The thing with P-TECH is, I hear a lot of people say, well, we have a culinary arts kitchen, and that may work if your workforce data says that culinary arts chefs in this area are high-wage, high-demand careers. That may not work if that's not what the workforce data says. We have worked with districts before where agriculture was not a high-wage, high-demand career, but we were able to say, let's come visit, let's look at the data, and then make that point, and TEA has approved that. But typically, you're designing programs of study with high-wage, high-demand outcomes with multiple entry and exit points for a student. So at the bare minimum, they're going to get an industry-based certification that's state-aligned, a level 1 certificate through a technical school, a level 2 certificate through a technical school. In the CEN model, 90% of our graduates, we target for the Associates of Arts, of Science, or Associates of Applied Science, which is a degree through the technical schools. And then all of those degrees align to bachelor options. And so the students in the program, they decide where they're wanting to go career-wise in a high-wage, high-demand, and then they have multiple entry and exit points. So under Decision 9A, there's $400,000 for the planning. It's a 2-year grant. And then I think it's $200 or $250 for the implementation grant. For districts that would come into that, we would overlap that, though, with the school action model. Oh, there's my cheat sheet. We would overlap that with the school action model where after we had set your goals, where are you wanting to go, what programs of study are you wanting to implement, we would come back in, apply for the school action grant in cycle 5, which would be next spring. And then if you have campuses that are C, D, or Fs, or C, or not rated in this current system, then we would have additional funds to be able to do those school redesigns in the P20 model. We're asking our districts, I'm going to go back to that one slide. We're asking our districts to really focus on 9A if they've never received P-TECH funding, and then also 9C, because to implement the CEN model, and you don't have to have embedded teachers for your dual credit, but if you're already doing dual credit, which you are, you know how easier it is to have those embedded teachers. And so if you have teachers on staff that are willing to go for their masters, there's money sitting on the table with TEA right now to pay for that. We'll go to the next one now. So there's our $400,000 for planning, $200,000 for success, and then school action fund is a little reverse. It's $250,000 per campus, and then $500,000 for the next 2 years. So a district stands to be able to gain, let's just say you have one campus that qualifies for school action. A district stands to be able to gain a substantial amount of money over the next 3 years under these 2 T-class elements from TEA. And that money would offset the cost that would have it be involved to implement all of the elements of the CEN model. We'll go to this is the timeline. So like I said, it was supposed to open today unless it started working in the last a little bit, the link was not working, but it is a drop-down application. It's a Qualtrics survey. It's not all of those narratives that you have to worry about. And it is supposed to be based off of a funding formula, not a competitive grant. There is $1.4 billion, and so you have a lot of districts looking at it. We have heard one service center say that it's going to be a first-come, first-served basis. So, you know, I haven't heard that from TEA, but service centers have a better inline track. The application closes on the 20th of August, and then districts are awarded their their award notice by September. One thing they are asking districts to do, if you're considering this, is that as your board policy doesn't allow for pre-expenditure or pre-award expenditure for grants, you might want to adjust your policy, because you can spend this money in pre-award cost all the way back to March 1st of 2021. And so there's a long runway there of being able to cover cost, but your board policy may prevent that. Next slide, please. I think we're getting. So next steps, if you're interested in pursuing this, I would really encourage looking at that T-class application. There's a lot of other great decisions in there. One thing that we didn't have in this slide that Dr. Alexander mentioned is the Grow Your Own program. If you're having trouble recruiting teachers and you do not have an education and training program, then look at the decisions 4 and 5 to be able to fund Grow Your Own. And those pathways can be established under the P-TECH model, because in the state of Texas, everywhere, education is a high-wage, high-demand career. So these are the next steps. Bless you. We like to come and conduct on-site visits, just look at facilities and talk about programs that are already in place, what CTE programs you have, you know, what's your desire, what are your intended outcomes. We have Dr. Nelson Coulter on staff, can work with the superintendents and the boards to do a budget analysis if you're concerned about additional funding needed for, say you want to open a vet clinic. That's not in that model. I mean, there's a lot of extra money sitting out there. And so if you need that support, then we create a customized covenant with the districts, and basically it spells out this is what CEN is doing, this is what the district commits. Districts can walk away from it with a 30-day notice. It's not like it's set in stone by any means, but it's really just laying out what your expectations for CEN are, what the districts are committing to. If you haven't been, I think Venus has been to Roscoe, but we encourage on-site visits to model districts. And basically what we're hoping to do, and Venus, if you paid attention when we were hitting those slides pretty fast with the Texas model, we want a Roscoe right here in this AgriLife region. Venus is that targeted district in this area because of your interest, your team of 8. And then moving forward in 3 or 4 years, you would be hosting and being able to support districts from this area as being a model district. And then we will, if the board wants an additional presentation, we can always come back. So those are our next steps in the implementation of the CEN model. I think we're at the end. We are.
I've been around a long time, so I've dealt with a lot of boards and a lot of administrative teams, and I know most likely to succeed when I'm looking at it, and you definitely fall in that category if this is a direction you choose to go. I have no doubt in my mind that you won't be not only a successful Texas demonstration site, but a national demonstration site for post-secondary credential attainment for all students. And that's the crisis, not just in Texas, but served us well for 100 years. But as you look at that model is actually preparing students for our past. And we want a model to prepare students for their future. And it's distinctly different.
Just want to remind everybody that we can hear one another and hear okay, but for those people who, as we're videoing the meeting, we want to make sure and use our microphones. But I did want to, what excites me about this is what you had to say about, again, removing those barriers and providing those supports. Anybody who has even any kind of intimate knowledge of our student body, or maybe even themselves that have gone through this, know exactly what you're talking about. And so we are already so close to this. We have so many of our students who graduate with 40, 50 plus dual credit hours. So that's an easy turn. And the rest of this, the school district has done a tremendous job of providing that. So let's get a little bit of help from the state to finish the job. I think it'd be great.
Could I ask a couple of questions real fast? First off, I am curious to know what is the enrollment in Roscoe?
Roscoe's about 650
Okay.
students. Do I need to get up on this microphone?
No, well, yeah, probably because of.
Yeah, about 650 students.
And then the other two questions is just exactly where we're headed with this. Because the figures I'm hearing, and they may be distorted, is that like our generation, what's the last group that came through? The generations. Millennials are the most educated, underemployed generation in America and the biggest. Why are they not filling these jobs when I know several of my family members have master's degrees and they're about, honestly, probably worthless in the workforce. So that's one question. Are we leading these, how are we going to do it different with these college students? And then, as we've done our research, and you've had groups of large employers in this area come in, they were looking for a educated work, blue collar student more than they were looking for, an educated white collar group. And is that addressed in this? And those are my two main questions.
Yeah, and those are great questions, and we've got to not just work harder, but we've got to work smarter, and we've got to be very intentional in working with workforce and collecting the data. What are the workforce opportunities in this region? Because keep in mind, we're trying to reverse that suburban movement that began in the 1950s, where the best and brightest leave the rural areas for the suburban and urban sectors never to return. And part of the rural dilemma is depleted social capital, depleted brain power. So we've got to be intentional and make sure that the degrees lead to those employment opportunities. And then, as far as the blue collar thing, and there are a lot of really good blue collar jobs that are great when you're in your 20s. They're not quite as great in the 30s. They get a little bit harder to do in the 40s and 50s. And so trying to create lifetime learners that have job satisfaction, opportunity for advancement, and employability. And, keep in mind that if that expectation for all students, they're gonna filter out at different levels. And I don't think we're gonna anytime soon, at least, get into a situation where we've got a too highly educated workforce.
The other piece of that is with the P-TECH model, you're designing degrees in both like traditional college where you would go to community and then on to university, 4-year universities, but you're also designing degrees that will lead to Associate of Applied Sciences, AAS degrees, that are technical degrees. So you can go to TSTC and get an AAS degree in diesel mechanics. And then through partnerships with some very innovative universities, they can take that AAS degree and go on and earn a bachelor's, a BAS degree, a Bachelor's of Arts and Applied Science. Angelo State is launching a Bachelor's of Arts of Applied Science. So the higher ed community is doing a good job of trying to bridge that. And so if a student wants to be a diesel mechanic, it's a great salary, great career, but they have the foundation with that AAS degree that when they get to a point in their life where they don't want to work 60 hours a week working on engines, mechanical engines, they can go on back to school if that's what they want to do and get that bachelor's and then go, into management or whatever. So it is providing opportunities that without like capping those, but 99% of all jobs require something beyond high school degrees. So that's an industry certification, a level 1 or level 2 certificates. When I say those terms, those are also technical college terms. And those are all part of that P-TECH model. So if, I'll just stick with diesel mechanics, that's something that your workforce data says is needed in this area, then we design a pathway that has an industry certification, probably an OSHA 30 certification, a level 1 certificate, a level 2 that they should be able to earn by the time that they graduate from high school. And then they would continue their P20 experience on to earn that associate degree at TSTC or whatever the higher ed partner would be. And so that is a well-prepared person for a blue-collar career, and that, a lot of folks like hands-on, and thank God for plumbers, and thank God for people that's gonna fix my engine when it dies. But they also have additional options that they can build on past that.
Yeah, keep in mind this, to prepare lifetime learners, that's the research, for careers that don't yet exist, because there are thousands of jobs that will be in existence 10 years from now that don't exist today. And so how do we create folks that are always in an education mode? The reality is these graduates today, they'll experience 6 or 7 different careers. Not, the days are gone for most of them where it'd be 40 years in a career, then a retirement. It's just a different world.
I think a key part of this is the partnership with Collegiate EduNation that Dr. Alexander represents. In examining the workforce data, that takes a good look at what's most needed in this area. That's key, because that's coming right out of Venus High School, and if they're going to finish on through the P20, that is fantastic. But they can be employable right here, is the whole point.
Yeah, and that's why it's not a standardized model. We try to analyze the community and customize the opportunity for that community. There's no 2 communities that are exactly alike, and there's no 2 that have the exact same need.
Okay, Mr. Hopper, maybe one question for you. If we decide to do this, go for it. With the limited staff, the limited facilities, and kids crawling everywhere, what would we have to have in addition to implement this right away, as far as staff, as far as facilities? I know there's money available, but realistically, what would it take?
Well, facility is going to be a big issue. Where are we going to do this right now? And I think I've mentioned it before. We just moved in 6 portables over the holidays, and so we're getting full as we speak, and with a whole lot more coming on. So facility is going to be our biggest challenge, Joe. Now, this is sort of a chicken and an egg thing. Do you build the facility? Well, we can't build the facility until we get the students. When we get the students, we don't have any place to put them. So that's the oddity of the way we're all funded here in the state of Texas. So it will be an awkward challenge for a few years. I think you guys went through some of those challenges too in Roscoe, didn't you?
Yeah, we've got, you know, got Edgy Weld down at what used to be a welding shop that is now a welding shop again, open to the public. We've got Edgy Drone at an old department store downtown. That we've got the Montessori Early Childhood at an old grocery store. And so every situation's different, and you just look at a situation and you got to look at it like, this glass is half full. What do we do with this opportunity? Instead of the typical rural attitude, well, we're rural, we can't do anything anyway. And so, but other than just die on the vine and go away. So you actually kind of turn the town into the school. What are the apprenticeship opportunities? You know, what?
And this is where the creativity really comes in.
Yeah.
So we've got, we've been talking about that facility down on 3rd Street for some time. You know, as he said, when we went and some of us went out to Roscoe and visited, and I'd really like to make a second trip out there and take some board members. But these guys are all over town. Now, you can be all over town in Roscoe and you don't have to travel too far though, right? But they are. You know, there's a vacant building here. There's one over there. And so you occupy those buildings as you can. And do whatever you have to do. I do believe there will be a time in the not too distant future where we'll be able to have a facility where most all of this is going to be centralized. But until that time, yes, we don't wait for that time to happen. I think our biggest opportunity though is going to be to make use of what we have on 3rd Street.
And you know, it always, like you said, it gets back to opportunity. And I tell people all the time, this is a heavy lift. If what you're doing is working, you need to keep on doing it, because this is a lot of work. This is difficult. But in rural sectors, for 87% of the population, what we're doing is not working. Hopefully you're in that 13% that it is. Roscoe was not. And so how do we move that 13% of our students that are actually going to be successful to 90% or greater? Because that is really why we exist.
And I think that's why we're having the discussion, because we see so many of our kids that, like you said, we share the same vision on that. Doesn't matter where you come from, it's where you headed. And I don't want those kids. The biggest, I'm firmly convinced that the biggest obstacles in any human being's life are self-imposed. I don't see how I'm going to get there, so I'm not going to try. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means they don't have that vision. Well, the way you have the vision is to actually have success and build tools and supports along the way. And that's what we're talking about. That's the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're, the statistics they don't lie, and most people that are born into generational poverty will die in generational poverty. And that, if we can do something about that crisis, that's where we have that moral obligation to do what we can do.
Right. And the reason they call it generational poverty is because there's a culture. There's a culture of, when I hit a roadblock, I don't know how to get past that roadblock. It's not that I don't have the strength, I don't have the intellect, I don't have the creativity. I just don't know how. But the kid that comes from that family that surpasses those roadblocks, they can teach them how. That doesn't, again, mean that their families are bad families. But if you've not been down that road before, it's impossible to show your kids how to get down that road.
In higher education, the research bears it out. That's the only way to break generational poverty. And so the opportunities for that alignment are greater than they've ever been before. How do we structure ourselves to take advantage of those opportunities?
Well, I'll say one last thing, and we're over 76% economically disadvantaged in our school district. We're 25% English language learners here, so that's already a heavy lift. But these are our kids, and they're great, great kids, and we're very proud of them and what they do. But this is the work that's before us, and I full well believe in our kids and what they can do, and I'm excited for the potential that we can provide to them. So, Dr. Alexander, thank you for coming. And is there anybody else that has a question?
Well, I mean, you already know that I'm a big proponent of making use of that Third Street facilities. I've been pushing that for years. So whatever we can do to benefit these kids, I'm for it.
Appreciate your time tonight, and you got a great situation here. I'm excited about the future in Venus, possibly Collegian ISD. Best wishes.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'll tell you what, if there's no objections, we want to take a 5-minute break and we'll come back and. Okay. Well, we'll get started again. Just for the record, we went to break at 8:29. We're coming back in open session. I'm not saying open session. We're starting the meeting back at 8:35. We're gonna go to item number 7, student growth performance update. Anne Marie, all right.
All right, so we're going to take a quick look at student outcome goal number 3, which was the third of the board goals for this year. And the goal itself stated that we want to increase the number of graduates graduating with CCMR indicators at the state average or above from 48.3 to 60 by June of 2024. So go ahead and go on to the next one. So as that goal is stated, we have already we have met the benchmark for this year by about 4%. So our goal for the end of this past year was to be at 52%, and we were at 56.6% students graduating with a CCMR indicator. So that's great. And we'll go on to the progress measures. So this one took a hit because the colleges waived the SAT requirement because of COVID issues. So we just had far fewer students take the SAT or ACT, which is why it's such a huge dip in the number of students who met that criteria. So the students who took it, most of them met the criteria, but it was just a handful of students who took the SAT this year. But that number will go back up next year. Our second progress measure was looking at the students who took the advanced placement exam. We want them to get a score of 3 or higher. We do not have the scores yet, so I cannot tell you how we did on that goal. And then the last one, which is our third progress measure, we're looking at the number of industry-based certifications that students earn. And so we had a total of 52 this year, which is really good. So we've already exceeded what we had set as the goal. And we talked during the special training about what these goals will look like for next year. Any questions? Okay, that's it.
We're gonna move some of those goals up.
Yes, we're going to make the goals a little bit more rigorous so that we're looking at the right indicators and making sure that we're focused on what we want to move, and we'll see a lot of improvement next year.
Okay. All right, moving on to item number 8, presentation of 2021 through 2022 employee handbook.
So the employee handbook really didn't have anything of substance from a local standpoint, and we there were some things that were listed in here. My question is, as you read through there, did y'all have any questions? We had on page 53. And these are just things that were done by the state that were differences in there. 63, I'm sorry, discharge of convicted employees. Page 66, and this is according to policies FB and FFH. This is equal education opportunities, and you can see an update there. And again, that's at the state level. On page 69, under bullying, we've included cyberbullying among the other pieces there. A few others along through there. Did y'all have any questions over any of these? These were all basically state level changes and none local.
Okay.
Just reflecting change to policy. Yes.
This was one thing that Kelly was required to put in, was the disease prevention and mitigation plan, was
Yep.
what we talked about last time.
Yeah, the infectious disease prevention and mitigation plan, the thing that we talked about, just reviewed at the last meeting that we had, and so that's up there as well.
All right. No other questions. We'll go to Item number 9, presentation of the 2021-2022 student handbook.
All right, that's me. So we made the changes, obviously, from the model handbook. Not a whole lot of things changed this year. The changes that did come down, we made a change to the wording of our grading policy. And so it had said so many grades in so many days, and we changed that to 72 hours after something's due. So if it's due today, they have 72 hours to enter that grade in the grade book. And that gives parents a clearer picture of when to expect that. There was a caveat, because we talked about sometimes they write big research papers or things and you might not can get that graded. So there would be an exception, but that exception would only be if they went and talked to the principal ahead of time. But other than that, everything would be 72 hours. We made a few changes to dress code. So we took out the wording for natural hair color and just left that alone. That became a huge issue that we were fighting constantly, and us fighting it was a bigger disruption than it actually being the way it was. We made a couple of other changes, based on the legislative updates. So they put in that you could not have gender-specific things in your dress code, and, oh, yep, got me a microphone. So when that passed, that meant we had to take out the policy about earrings, because we had it written that boys couldn't wear earrings, and that was gender-specific. So that had to come out, and then, it specifically said boys couldn't wear makeup, and so those things had to come out based on legislative updates. And then the big thing, I guess, that changed with House Bill 4545, and I'm sure y'all will talk a whole lot about that, was 3rd grade and 8th grade, that retention piece that, they would take the STAR test and they had 3 opportunities and then they would retain. All of that has gone away. They will take the test one time. There is no retention on it. There are a lot of other things that are being put in place with House Bill 45. But that piece came out of our handbook because that's no longer a state requirement. So those were really the only changes that came about. I'll answer any questions you guys have. Okay.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, moving on to item number 10, consider approval of the 2021-2022 Student Code of Conduct.
The Code of Conduct was actually, they sent us the latest update just a couple of days ago, but the changes are not in the content per se, but in some of the language, like they updated some of the glossary terms, and we just had to make sure we go through because they had a lot of this person or that person choices. So, for example, they would say the principal or the PBI's coordinator are responsible for X, Y, or Z. And so it was a matter of making changes that just fit what we're already doing here. We're not changing our policy, we were just making them clear in the Code of Conduct. So those are the new things. The only thing that's truly new, and it's interesting that the legislature this year decided to add to our list of prohibited items are silencers, firearm silencers. They don't mention the firearm, just these silencers. So you can no longer have a silencer in your possession. Otherwise, in terms of content and procedures, there are no changes. We just clarified in our Code of Conduct who's responsible for what item. Questions?
Yeah. Well, and for clarification, and of course, we can't have firearms.
No.
But,
it says it's in a different section. So firearms,
Yeah.
then it lists all the prohibited things like, brass knuckles and all of those kind of things that students can't have, but they've added silencers.
I'll make a motion, we approve the 2021-2022 Student Code of Conduct.
I got a motion by Les. I got a second.
I'll second.
A second by Katie. All in favor? Motion passes. All right. Moving on to item number 11, the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda anybody wants to pull out? Further discussion?
I'll make a motion that we pass the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, got a motion by Greg, I got a second by Tasha. All in favor? Motion passes. Okay. All right, moving down to item number 12, consider approval of water and wastewater easement with the city of Venus.
All right, if you take a look on, in your packet, what you've got is, the city has got some water that comes down the, northeast corner of this block and comes down onto, and just comes up to our property. What they're asking for is to, they're wanting to bring the water down to just about where the road is stubbed in up here, and eventually, of course, bring it on down to other housing. This is water and sewer. So this would simply be an easement to allow them to do so. And you can see the map that shows the diagram for where that would go. Eventually, this is going to be underneath, of course, the TxDOT road that they will put in. Yes, sir. So this would just grant them the easement to be able to put that line in.
Okay.
I'll make a motion, we approve, the water and wastewater easement for the city of Venus.
Okay, I got a motion by Les. I got a second?
I'll second.
Second by Joe. All in favor? Motion passes. Okay. All right, moving on to item number 13. Consider approval of board resolution for depository contract for funds of Independent School District under Texas Education Code.
Okay.
Chapter 45, Joe. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah,
I didn't realize you had all that.
I know, I'm like, oh.
So, okay, so we're looking at depository contract, and so we've got a comparison in here by from 4 different entities. We've been banking with Cowboy Bank for some time. And Megan, would you like to kind of talk us through this comparison?
Sure. Essentially, so we went out to bid in May, so we're bringing this to you a little bit late. So the 2 bids that we did get back were from Cowboy Bank and then from First Financial. And so we weren't really pleased with those 2. Everybody else that we went out and got for bid for, we got it back a no. Wells Fargo didn't want to bid, BBVA did not want to bid, Grandview Bank did not want to bid. And so we wanted to present you with more than just 2 options. So we went back out to bid, and we went to Prosperity Bank, and we also went to Pinnacle Bank. And so basically what you see up there is just the things that are really important to us. Things like sweep accounts and things like that, we don't participate in. So we just wanted to kind of hit the highlights. But as you can see, Cowboy Bank is looking to be the better option still, due to the interest rate and the money market accounts.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the interest rate is by far the biggest difference in.
And also too, it's worth noting that the $2.5 million of pledged securities, you know, that can be negotiated throughout the year. If we want to communicate with Cowboy Bank about possibly increasing that, that's something that they're going to have to take before their board before they can do that. But I think that option is feasible.
So to be clear, we're recommending.
Yes,
Cowboy
my
Bank.
recommendation would be to stay with Cowboy Bank.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions, or we can make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution for depository contract for funds of independent school districts, naming Cowboy Bank as a depository.
Okay, we got a motion by Tasha. I got a second. Second by Greg. All in favor? Motion passes. Okay. All right. Okay, going to item number 14, consider approval of ESSER 3 plan. Mr. Hollis?
we've briefly have touched on some of this information prior to, but I can't say enough about the hard work that these administrators, Dr. Morgan, everyone involved, teaching staff, interventionists, all the people that worked very hard to come up with this plan. And this is the Cliff Note version, because the actual plan, we would be here another 30, 45 minutes. So what we want to do is provide this plan for you for your approval. And in an overview of this, ultimately we started that first week of June. We pulled our map data, we pulled our STAR data. We had to wait on some of the STAR data to come in to finalize, but we looked very intensively at those two data points as far as how our kids perform. We made a comparison between what MAP showed us versus our STAR outcomes, and the analysis of that data came to this result. Without reading the entire thing to you, our reading and math scores weren't where they needed to be. Bottom line, our students didn't make the growth that we had hoped for. However, with all of the things that we've encompassed over the last year, the most important piece that we came out of this is we're not going to make excuses. We're not going to blame COVID. We're not going to say this one was here longer than this, those sorts of things. It gave us a solid set of data points to address where we are and what we're going to do moving forward. So this ESSER III fund is designed solely on interventions and strategies to turn that around. And so the areas that we're going to look at as far as a prioritized set of strategies is: one, build teacher capacity by implement key components of effective instruction and deliver interventions and individualized supports. One of the things that we noticed from our data dig is the fact that we're always targeting those Tier 2 and Tier 3 students, because those are the ones that are the lowest, and we've got to get those up. What it was indicated through the data dig is we didn't move our Tier 1s. So we didn't get that movement of Tier 3, Tier 2, and Tier 1 that we would have expected. So we're going to use training, we're going to use intervention devices that we're going to put in place to close the gap using this fund source. Look at very specific TEKS-aligned Tier 1 instruction. We know the areas that we are faltering in or lowest in, and so designing TEKS-based strategies and interventions to address those to close the gap. And I kind of chase a trail real quick. That House Bill 4545 aligns with all of the work that we're taking place here as far as the accelerated learning piece, even though it's two somewhat separate plans. Small group instruction that'll address Tier 1, GT, Tier 2, Tier 3, and the strategies to improve those. Training for all, teachers, interventionists, paraprofessionals, special ed, bilingual ESL, to coordinate and align strategies across the board to improve and move our students forward. Number two, ensure that all students have access to high-quality instructional materials. Dr. Morgan will touch on some of that information in a little bit, but we're using some of this fund source to put a higher level of curriculum, to help close this gap in some of our TEKS areas. Number three, provide high dosage tutoring to accelerate student learning. That's where some of the pieces of that HB 4545 come in. We weren't planning for that because we just got that information out, but it all blends together hand in glove. So having targeted tutorials, being very specific and intensive in targeting areas of the highest need and providing instruction and strategies to close those gaps as well. Part of this fund source will be used to provide high-quality instructional materials for the tutorials and training content leaders to develop the model aligned with the lesson for all tutors. We're going to be able to use our target is reading and math, ELAR, those things. But we're going to have an all-hands-on-deck somewhat approach so that we're providing high-level instruction for all across the board. And it's going to provide, we're going to have to provide the training and the quality of instruction to all of our teachers to make this work. The fourth one is implement a blended learning model of instruction with the RBL grant, and that movement, going back to that small group, specific station rotation type model, we're going to be able to fund some of those activities through the ESSER III grant as well. I handed you out a proposed budget of that $2.64 million. As of current, the way we have it allocated is, if you'll notice down there, the 20%, that 500,000 mark, that is specifically to be used for intervention and tutoring type options, okay? We also included the retention payment. Kelly was able to get me the latest. These are the people who actually stayed with us. So you can see the breakdown. That's going to be roughly $355,000 one-time payment in our appreciation for the hard work for all that our staff has gone through over the last 12 months. We're purchasing some technology to make sure we're on the forefront and every student has an appropriate device. And then the last piece down there is for the hotspots. We're still currently in negotiation with T-Mobile to reduce that cost, so that number should drop significantly. But trust me, with Dr. Morgan's help, we can allocate those funds to a different area pretty quickly. We could be here for an hour talking about all the little individual strategies, but I just want to give you a quick overview as far as the strategic data planning that we put in place to address the needs of not just one set of students, but all students across the district. Any questions?
I may have missed it, but are these retention payments one-time payments?
One-time payment.
Okay.
Real quick, as far as the retention payment goes, is it possible for some of our teachers that are also bus drivers to double dip, or is it just if you are
Well,
specifically?
if you're a teacher, you get $1,500.
Okay.
If you're a bus driver, you get the $500. It's basically, the way it's broken down is you've got your professional staff, teachers, administrators, librarians, nurses, all that sort of stuff, and then full-time employees, paraprofessionals, those type of individuals, and then the bus drivers. We have several staff members that are crossovers. They drive a bus in the morning and they teach all day, and they drive a bus in the afternoon. Yeah, they get $1,500. Those staff members that are just bus drivers are the ones that get the $5.
Understood. Figured I'd ask.
Any other questions?
No, in fact, these one-time retention payments, I remember reading, that's one of the biggest things that the ESSER funds are being used for. A lot of these school districts, so it's not uncommon.
Yes.
It's not something we're doing that's new. It's a lot of districts are using that funding for those payments, so. Well, anybody have any other questions, or like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we pass.
You gotta,
This is presented.
okay. Got a motion by Greg. I got
I'll
a second.
second.
Got a second by Tasha. All in favor? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a point of order, we do have to approve the ESSER expenditures as a separate item. So you're going to see that appear later on the board agenda separated out. So you've approved the plan, the usage, so the expenditures themselves will be approved at a later, I don't know what number that is, but anyway.
Correct. That would be,
It's actually number 24.
24, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay. Moving on to item number 15, consider approval of Lexia Core 5 and Power Up subscription renewal.
So this is actually one of the items on the ESSER plan. We discussed moving this over to use ESSER funds for the next 2 years to kind of like take the burden away from our instructional materials allotment to pay for the Lexia subscription. So it's $9,900 per campus. So that total PO will be just under $40,000 for the year. And Lexia is the adaptive computer program that we use in reading that allows teachers to really and truly personalize what each student needs and gets to work on those foundational skills. So this is what allows students to practice their missing phonics skills, word study skills, grammar skills. That's truly what they need. And then, so we've used it for 1 year. This will be year 2, so we'll be able to use it much more effectively this year.
And just, I'm sorry, the cost on this is the same as last year? Or
Yes.
This is just a renewal, so?
Yes.
Okay.
And ESSER is gonna pay for this too,
For this year, yes, sir.
for this year?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the one piece of the ESSER grant that is fabulous, is because it's the one grant that's out there that does not have the supplant restriction. So we're able to move some of the things we may have previously paid out of another fund source, whether it be local or title or whatever, and cover the expense to lighten the load in our local, in some of our other budgets.
Anybody else have any other questions? I can make a motion, or?
I'll make a motion to approve the Lexia Core 5 and Power Up subscription renewal.
One thing I said, is there an amount that we, total amount that, for the subscription that we need to?
What did we say this was?
I couldn't read it, so is it?
So for our K-5 campuses, the total is $19,800, and then our secondary campuses, the total is $19,800. So it comes in right under $40,000.
Right on, okay, not to exceed 40,000? How's that? Okay, so I got a motion by Tasha.
I'll second.
I got a second by Katie. All in favor? Motion passes. Okay, thank you. Item number 16, consider approval of STEM Scopes math curriculum grades K through 5 purchase.
Yes, sir. So this is me again. So STEM Scopes is a complete math curriculum that we have been looking at since this spring to replace our current adopted math curriculum. So we've had a lot of struggles and concerns with the current math adoption in K-5. Our math coordinator, Mrs. Haddad, has done her best to help teachers work with it, but there are a lot of gaps in it. There are a lot of things that teachers struggle with implementing, and it has caused confusion for students in various grade levels. So we have not been happy with it, but until we found this, we didn't really know what to do about it. And so STEM Scopes Math, like I said, it's a complete math curriculum, but it's written very differently from a traditional textbook. So our current math textbook is what you remember from school, having a math textbook. You start on page 1, you work through all the worksheets until you're done at the end of the year. STEM Scopes Math is designed to be delivered in segments based on concepts. So, and teachers get to, they don't pick and choose which scopes they do, but they teach the scope of the math like all together. And it's done through what's called the 5E model. And so the 5 E's are engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And then STEM Scopes also adds in an intervention and acceleration piece. And so what that is doing is helping the students really engage in the concepts of math and understand how the concepts work together, which is very much how the TEKS are written nowadays. So you may have heard a little bit about like the Common Core math and how people hate it and it's terrible and people are scared of it. the Texas math standards are actually written the same way. And so our teachers have been struggling with how do we teach math based on concepts, based on pictures, based on visuals. Why don't we just teach to add and subtract the way we all learn to add and subtract? And it's because we're trying to get kids to understand the relationships behind numbers, the concepts behind how numbers work together. And so the STEM Scopes math curriculum is it is designed to help students learn it through that experiential, that hands-on sort of way. So the STEM Scopes complete package. So what we're asking for here is everything they offer, basically. So what it includes is the access to the digital curriculum, plus the kits that the teachers will need to really be able to deliver it efficiently and effectively. And so what you see on the quote that you have are all of the resources that they offer. So it is an online curriculum, but it also comes with printed packages to make it easier for teachers to navigate and then to use. Without purchasing the printed materials, teachers are going to resort to printing them off themselves, which is going to, that cost is not going to be offset at all, because we're going to go through a lot more paper, and that just puts just a bigger burden on the teachers to print and then sort and organize. So it's just more efficient for the teachers for us to purchase the printed materials ahead of time. So that's one. Another kit that you see on there is the manipulatives kit. This is going to be really huge for each grade level to have those hands-on materials to help students when they're working with the different elements of math. So it is not worksheet based. It is put your hands in it, move stuff around, figure things out. That's how the curriculum is written. So that those manipulatives kits are just going to help build those resources for teachers so that they can have students doing the hands-on work. And then we have some other items on here. The notebook and assessment print bundle, those are the actual printed pages students will need to practice on. So it is not a workbook where you just work through page 1 and go through the end, but there is work to be done that happens to be on a sheet. So there are worksheets. And so again, it is just more effective and efficient for teachers to have those prepared ahead of time. So all of those pieces together is what totals the implementation of the program. And so the total on that, including shipping, is $106,195.15. So that, I mean, that's a lot more than what we would traditionally pay for a new curriculum. But this is going to give us, it's going to give teachers everything. So that we won't have to come back later and say, I know we asked for the curriculum, but now we really need this piece of it. So this is everything for the implementation. And then when it comes to next year, we'll have 2 options for renewal, and we'll talk about those next year. But that is a renewal cost, so this is not a one-time cost. If we next year decide we only want to renew the online access and have teachers make do with the printed materials they've already received, the renewal will be about $7,900. If we decide we want to renew the consumable print items, that would bump up to about $52,000. And so that is something this year we will have to consider as we use the items. What do we really need and what do we not? But for this first implementation year, I am asking that we go ahead and purchase all of the kits and all of the bundles so that teachers have everything they need to really implement the curriculum with fidelity.
Dr. Morgan, you want to talk just a second about how we're going to train teachers on this?
Yes, so we do have already a couple of just initial webinars scheduled for the next couple of weeks so that teachers who are eager and ready to get their eyes on it will have that opportunity. And then during August staff development, we'll have a presenter from STEM Scopes come and train the 2 groups of teachers, half a day at one campus, half a day at the other. And then also during our PLC time and our PLC days, our math coach will be able to continue supporting teachers with the rollout of the curriculum. So not just here you go, have fun with your new curriculum, but here are the standards we need to teach this unit. Here are the resources that we need to be looking at in the STEM Scopes, and here's how we put it together. The different pieces of it are also going to directly support that blended learning we've been talking about and the small group instruction. which is a huge part of the ESSER plan and helping move students and fill in the gaps.
How long has this been out? Is this new?
The math piece is actually relatively new. So STEM Scopes has been around for a while, but most people have only heard of the science. And so it did start as a science curriculum and resource. But the STEM Scopes math is fairly new, and they only have through 5th grade. So, which is why we're only talking about K-5 right now. But that is something that hopefully they would continue to roll out in the future.
And then what is the cost for traditionally what we've used in the past?
So I was not a part of the original the math adoption that we have right now. I'm trying to remember what, for example, the reading adoption was a couple of years ago. It was up there with these kind of numbers. Probably not quite as much as this. The difference is that when we adopt it through the state, it's usually a one-time payment over 7 or 8 years of the adoption, whereas this is going to come with that renewal fee because of the online access until the new math adoption, which has been pushed off again. So the new math adoption, I want to say, is not until 24-25. So no matter what, next year we have to purchase new math curriculum, or we have to pay for what we're already using because that adoption is going to expire.
Can we somehow put this in the ESSER funds?
Yes. So.
Oh, well then. Okay.
So we did put that in as a part of that addressing Tier 1 instruction, making sure all students have what they need and training teachers. So we do want to use the ESSER funds for this implementation, and it's also in there for year 2 for that renewal. It will be year 3 where we have a conversation about, do we want to just renew the online access or the printed materials, because then we'll be looking back at our local funds or our regular title funds.
Is that part of that, the breakdown of probably in that 1.2? Is that?
No, 1.2, I missed that.
Yeah.
The 1.2 is paying salaries for interventionists. That's been pulled out of our local budget. So we're able to cover 1.2 million in salaries for the interventionists, which will be helping include this. This is included in that 528,000 because it's intervention supplies.
Okay.
Any other questions that I can answer for you?
Anybody? All right. Anybody like to make a motion or?
I'll make a motion that we approve the STEM Scopes math curriculum for grades K-5 purchase.
Got a motion by Katie and a second by Les. All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 17, consider approval of classroom furniture purchase for Raising Blended Learners Grant Program.
So Warren Hudson, our instructional technologist, is also our grant manager for the Blended Learning Grant. So, Warren?
Yes, sir. And as a part of the grant, in incorporating blended learning instructional strategies, the purpose of this furniture purchase is to provide 7 classrooms with modular furniture that is easier to reconfigure on a regular basis, as opposed to the single-piece desks that occupy most of our classrooms right now. The exact models of what we're going to be buying are identical to what was purchased for the most recent addition to the middle school, and so they are the triangular desks and a separate chair that allow teachers to kind of arrange things in a variety of ways that are going to be suited to the instructional strategies they'll be used for. And of the 3 quotes, obviously my recommendation is the one that is the cheapest, and this is paid for 100% out of Raising Blended Learners grant funds.
Anybody have any questions? Like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve this as presented.
Got a motion by Joe, and I got a second?
I'll second.
A second by Tasha. All in favor? Motion passes. Thank you.
Was it, what's the name of the?
Worthington Direct.
Thank you.
All right. On to item number 18, consider approval of memorandum of understanding with Mansfield ISD for third-party skills testing and commercial driver's license.
Yes, we, we're very fortunate to have been able to offer, to offer training for CDL on-site here in Venus from a gentleman from Mansfield ISD, actually working through ESC 11 to do that for us. So now this would be an MOU with Mansfield ISD for third-party skills testing for that CDL, just the next phrase in that. Yes, sir.
One of the things with all the mess with the whole driver's license issue is we've got the bulk of our staff that needed it got their 20 hours, which is just the ability to haul passengers. So now we need the testing piece, and I know that we've got a couple of drivers that are ready to test. Well, Kathy goes in and tries to set up the testing piece through the Cleburne office. It was going to be mid-September before they could even get in to take the test. By using this MOU group, they can pretty much test us on a regular basis. And then once we're to the point that we need to take the driving test, they can do that as well.
Okay. Maybe I'd like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we that we approve the memorandum of understanding with Mansfield ISD for third-party skills testing for CDLs.
Okay, got a motion by Katie. Have a second? Second by Greg. All in favor? Motion passes. All right, number 19, consider approval of general fund budget amendment.
Okay, this budget amendment has to do with hail damage several months ago, I guess. And this was our buses, our transportation fleet. So Megan, you want to address that, please?
So basically what Mr. Hopper just said, these are the insurance proceeds that we received from TASB for the hail damage to our buses, our vehicles and things like that. So basically it's just moving it out of the revenue and putting it into transportation.
About $135,000 worth of damage?
$185,000.
$185,000.
Worth of hail damage, so.
All right. Well, thank you. Anybody like to make a motion?
I make a motion, we approve the general fund budget amendment.
Thank you. I got a motion by Les, second by Katie. All in favor? Motion passes. All right, moving on. Consider approval, item number 20, consider approval of HB 547 and changes in UIL participation by non-enrolled homeschool students.
Okay, so this was an offshoot or what sprung out of the 87th legislature. House Bill 547 enables homeschool students who are living in the school district to be able to participate in UIL activities if the school board chooses to allow it. The school board either can choose to allow it or choose not to allow it. But House Bill 547 gives us that discretion. So we've talked about this quite a bit. I've actually even conferred with some of my colleagues that are nearby. And in keeping with the same school of thought, we haven't had, in my tenure here, which hasn't been that long, but haven't had this question come up. And so we discussed it and thought that, one of the difficulties may be in, you have somebody who's off-site and they have to come on-site. If something happens, they're supposed to go by our, whether they're even that homeschool student has to go by our own discipline policies. So there's the potential of an awkward situation, even though in UIL activities, this is pretty remote possibility, but should it be so, that homeschool student would have to attend our DAEP if they incurred such a consequence. So that, and all that would be entailed there. But anyway, Mr. Athletic Director, you want to address some of this?
The other piece of that is the whole eligibility piece. And, For example, students who compete in extracurricular activities have to be passing the first 6 weeks of school in grade point checks. That is not the case for homeschool students. There's a battery of things that they have to take in order to prove academic eligibility. And so, say, the second grading period, they provide us with whatever information that they have from their homeschool. If it shows we have to accept it because it shows that they're passing their homeschool program. So there's some question marks out there in that regards, as well as some of the discipline issues as well.
What about the drug testing?
Based on our policy,
The drug testing?
yes.
So, well, first off, are there any other questions?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, the drug testing, and also they're required to get the shots that every student in the district is required to get now, so there's a lot of things that they'd have to do in order to be eligible.
Probably the biggest discrepancy, I guess, would be, as Mr. Moore indicated, and that's just the eligibility piece. You know, the documentation for that would be pretty difficult. So for that reason, we at this time would recommend that we not allow homeschool students access to these programs at this time. Something that we could, if we decided to change that in the future, we certainly could.
Do we know how many students we have that are homeschooled, or how many students in the district are homeschooled?
Here's the issue, and I've talked with Ms. Nedick, that exact same. I don't know how many homeschool students. There's not an accurate way to get that number, in the fact that when they check out of school and they check the box homeschool, then they're out of our system. They could go homeschool and be living in Mansfield now. So we could find out how many students have gone homeschool, but we couldn't get a concrete, accurate number as far as if those students were still living in the district or not, without some deep dive in research.
Well, for me, I think it would, being that you just passed this legislative session, that it would be hard for any district to even just kind of roll this out and adopt it in such a short period of time. I think this is obviously one of those that Tim Tebow, has been pushing throughout the, and
If you got one of those in the district, let me know.
Yeah,
and I'll reverse my decision.
We could change this real quick.
Yeah. and granted, I looked at it from all sides, and but I see that it is in a short period of time for us starting up. It would be really hard for us to implement, or any district.
Just because other people are doing things doesn't mean we should or should not. But in querying some of my colleagues, I haven't found a district yet that is going to be approving this.
If we don't want to approve this, do we need a motion not to? Or do we just not implement it?
Yeah, we need a motion that would not allow enrollment of not allow students of homeschool students to participate in UIL in our district. Is that what you were saying?
Well, then I'll make that motion not to approve.
Okay.
Non-registered students.
Okay. I've got a motion by Greg,
I'll second.
second by Tasha. All in favor? All right, motion passes. Okay. We're gonna skip item 21 and 22. Go to item number 23. Consider approval of matters related to personnel, resignations, employment, positions. Don't have any? Okay, I'm sorry. We're gonna move on to item number 24. Consider approval of one-time retention payment. This is again related to the ESSER funds.
Right, that's that sheet that Hollis gave you just a bit ago.
I make a motion to approve the one-time retention payment.
I got a motion by Tasha. Second by Katie. All in favor? Motion passes. All right, moving on to item number 25, reports.
For my report, I've got a couple of things. The first thing I want to do is tell you how much we're working on House Bill 4545, and you've heard that quite a bit tonight. And the reason is because the legislature is requiring all school districts to provide 30 hours of tutorials for every student who did not complete satisfactorily or did not score satisfactorily, didn't pass the math portion of the STAR test and the reading portion. Now, I should say that's 30 hours each. If I didn't pass the math and I didn't pass the reading, that's a total of 60 hours of tutorials that have to be incurred by the students through the course of this school year before they take the test for the next time. That's significant. What's even more significant is House Bill 4545 is requiring that this is done on a 1-to-3 ratio, teacher to students. That is virtually impossible. Now, that can be, while we are going to have small group tutorials, what we will have to do, most likely, as well as most all school districts, we can go a little bit higher than that, and it's simply that we'll have to send out a letter to parents asking permission to be able to do so. But 1-to-3, we don't have enough staff to do that. We're already trying to carve out time in the school day to do this, and so, and again, I've talked to other superintendents in the area and discussed this with them and asked how they were approaching this. And right now, schools are scrambling because this information is, or the details of this information has only just recently come out. So we're all working to do that. Right now, we've got a couple of models, and the reason I bring it up to you is that if we can do it during the school day, we'll have to move some things around that may be able to work on some campuses. We've also got a model that would have us keeping those students at the end of a school day, say once a week, and for those students who pass, they would actually be able to go home early for a couple of hours while we keep the other students here for tutorials. That's one model that we've discussed. So we're working feverishly on getting that completed. Principals and assistant principals and counselors have been doing that, but that's House Bill 4545. And the other thing on there is that right after our last meeting, when we set goals, Travis, our new coach, let me know that we, believe it or not, it's been 2 years since we started Lone Star Governance, and we're up for an update. So in other words, we have a 2-day session, with exception of our most recent trainees, Joe and Tasha have recently done their update, so they're in the clear. But the rest of us have a 2-day training to do for Lone Star Governance, and we've picked out a couple of days. Now, if they don't work, we've got to make it to where it works. But those dates are the 27th and 28th of August, and so that's a Friday, Saturday. I can touch base with you later to see if that's going to work. And if we did that, that would be in Mansfield, and we would be combining with Fort Worth ISD and possibly about 3 other districts. But anyway, I'll touch base with you later and see if that works. So.
Do you have anything?
Well, and just touching base on that in some of the previous information, I can't say enough how much I appreciate our staff. Typically, we come together in the summer once we get the STAR results, and we get through that, and we determine the areas of need and those sorts of things. We've beat that horse to death this summer over the course of about 6 weeks up to this point. A lot of it's federally mandated. Some of it's from our state legislators in that 4545. But I think going forward, we're better prepared and better armed to address the needs of our students than we have ever in the past, up to this point. And it's all due to the hard work of these folks to my left and the staff that we have.
Thank you. Megan, would you mind going over our cash position and?
So, you will see an increase in the cash position, what I'm trying to do is, obviously, the tax pool interest rate is really low. So I'm trying to keep us at that threshold, because we are earning a better interest rate at Cowboy Bank. So I'm trying to keep us at that 110% threshold at the $2.5 million in the bank, because I'm trying to have our money make as much money as we possibly can. You're looking at an interest rate in the tax pool account of 0.0001 versus a 0.45 interest rate at Cowboy Bank. So that's why you see the increase in the cash position by bank.
Anybody have any questions?
I have a question on the child nutrition. I don't know
Okay.
if anybody would know the answer. But we're changing it back to Easy Pay, it looks like. So for people who had balances on the other one, will those balances automatically move over to Easy Pay? We don't, okay.
No.
I don't know, that's gonna have to be a question for Tina on how that would work.
What, the balances would have to be carried over. Now, the word automatically, but yes, they would have to be carried over if somebody has a balance on there.
Just know parents would need to be the ones to get that going, or if,
As far as how to make that happen, I don't know. I'll find out, but that's a good point. But parents aren't gonna lose their balances.
yeah, I mean, I didn't think they would. I just didn't know if they needed, if there was a step a parent needs to take to do that, or if it'll just automatically happen.
Yes, ma'am. And I couldn't tell you that
Yeah,
right now,
okay.
but I'll find out.
Okay.
Good question.
With like my school bucks, I just personally, I had a balance, when my daughter changed schools from Thorndale to Mumford. I contacted, my school bucks and they reimbursed me my balance. So I don't know if it would be something like that, but then also too, I know that she's looking at going towards the SSO option, so there wouldn't be any payments really coming in next year for, if that's correct. So,
What's SSO?
it's that summer feeding option that she was
So-
considering. Everything is free.
Free?
Yeah,
It's
free.
not the
Okay,
free and
they're free.
reduced, it's all at the flat.
All students, all student meals would be free
Be
across the
free
board.
across the board.
Excluding the snacks.
Yes.
But they still, yeah, that's what I was about to say, they still have the snack bars too.
But it's a good point to make that if a parent wants to reclaim their balance, they certainly should be able to do that. Yeah.
Okay. The, anybody else have any questions on any of the reports or? No? Okay. Do you have anything you want to add for athletics?
Well,
Ray?
just, we put that sheet out, just a general understanding, August the 2nd is the day it all begins as far as our kids are back. Volleyball, football, cross-country, they're running now. We had our little mini football camp, had about 25, 30 kids out this morning, going through the paces on the football field. So it's an exciting time because, you know, believe it or not, summer's basically over. And so it's time to get started and back in the routine.
I know we've been setting a lot of scrimmage dates and those kinds of things. Do we know when our Meet the Bulldog is?
That will be determined tomorrow when I meet with boosters. It's gonna be one of two dates, depending on how it works on their schedules.
Okay. All right, well. If there's, no other questions on reports, we'll go to, item number 27. Or maybe let me ask you this, is there any other board requests for additional items for the next board meeting on August 16th? Nothing?
No.
Okay.
Got the dates and everything. What was the date of that, training?
The
27 and 28, going from memory, so let me check the calendar to make sure that it's accurate, and it is. 27 and 28. It's a Friday, Saturday.
Okay. All right, well, if there are no other questions, we'll go to item 27, adjournment at 9:35. Thank y'all.